Hey, Sam from Tom's Tunes, and in this video, I'm gonna take you through uninstalling and reinstalling a tilt rotary system on your boat. Might be a pontoon boat, might be a fishing boat, maybe a speed boat. I'm gonna take you through, make it a little less scary for you, show you how to transfer this to a new steering column. I get it. You're afraid that you're gonna take something apart the wrong way, it's gonna fall into pieces or explode, and you're not gonna know how to put it back together. It's not that bad, I promise. So this is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time, but when you get into this, maybe you found this video because you tore it apart, started to, and got a little freaked out. It can be scary looking what's underneath all of this, and you'll see in a second why. But these systems are a rotary system, very similar in terms of how they operate to a standard rotary system, usually from Teleflex, U-Flex, some of those brands. But it's just a push-pull cable. Everything works on the inside the same, but in order to make it tilt, there's some more complex features that you're gonna see here. Let's get right into this. I am gonna jump ahead real quick to show you what the mechanism looks like on the backside, because that's what you're gonna be looking at if you're underneath the helm. I've already removed the cable, but that's what I'm gonna show you right now. You're gonna be looking at this on the underside of your helm. Hopefully you can fit your whole head, body, everything in there or get at it easily. This is what you're gonna be looking at. You're gonna have a cable coming in here. There's two bolts right here. Make note, this is housing just the end of that messy, greasy steering cable. These are actually locking into the steering cable to hold it in place. Let me show you where they're going on the cable real quick. This is the exact cable that came out of that system. This would be considered a quick connect rotary cable, usually Teleflex, U-Flex. You'll see them a few different ways, but this barb right here, those two bolts fit on either side of it and lock this whole thing in place. Because what happens with the steering cable is we lock this in place, the whole metal piece on the outside, the sheathing, all of this hard plastic, and inside of here, you've got this coily cable that's gonna come out when you turn the wheel. That's gonna push this cable out once those bolts are pulled out, and that is messy as heck. I have these laying around, they're just off of new cables. Maybe you're replacing the cable, maybe not, but get a plastic bag ready to put around this because it's greasy, messy, it's nasty. With this held in place, it allows the motor to be pushed and pulled by this end of the steering cable that's connected all the way back. So this pushes and pulls and turns the motor. There's your steering cable 101 for this project. One thing that the marine industry has together is steering cables. They literally work universally no matter what motor you have, up to, I usually say a 115, maybe a 140. Once you get into the 150s, especially the old V6s, that was kind of like how we used to cut it off. If you got in a V6, you should really have hydraulic steering. Well, now a lot of those 150s are inline 4-cylinder, 4-stroke. You should have hydraulic steering for that. But for most boats, most pontoon boats, you're gonna see a push-pull cable, whether it's a tilt helm or not. Perfectly fine, typically lasts 20, 30 years with no trouble. And they're pretty simple to replace if you need to. Now that you know what that cable looked like, you can imagine these two bolts coming in here. Those two bolts, you can see how they come in and they impede on this passage here. Those are clamping into the barb of the steering cable, the sheathing essentially, and those are holding it in place. I pulled them all the way out. Pull the cable out, you can turn the wheel to the right, that'll push it out, or you can just pull on the cable, the wheel will turn, it'll go. Works too, but these gotta be all the way out in order to do that. Then I immediately put them back in. There's a nylock nut on the back side. Those can fall out, so you gotta be careful, but I like to put those right back in and not lose them. Just a quarter 20, if you had to replace it with a short stainless one, you could, but let's just try to keep everything together so I don't have to worry about that in the future. I've got the helm off the boat. I already removed the cable. That's still actually up on the boat. And I'm just transferring this to a new steering console from pontoonstuff.com. First thing I gotta do is get this steering wheel off. You're typically gonna have a cap in the middle. Sometimes there, if you have a destroyer wheel, you might have a set screw you need to undo. But this is gonna come right off, and that exposes On most steering systems, a 3/4 inch nut and washer, and that's on a tapered shaft that the wheel goes onto. There's a key in there. We'll show you all that in a second here, but that's what you're up against here. And I've got other videos that show you different ways to remove the steering wheel, depending on how long it's been on there and whether it was greased or not before. It can make it really hard or a little bit easier, depends, to get this off. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this nylon locking nut off and the washer and expose just the steering shaft, and I'll show you how I'm gonna remove this wheel, because I bet it's not gonna be easy. I've got a big ratchet with a 3/4 inch socket. With that nut off, I just set it up on the console, keep it somewhere handy so you don't lose it. But most of the time, just pulling on this isn't gonna work. It's not gonna get it off of there. So if we look inside of here, you can see that steering shaft, there's a threaded end. The shaft is tapered, so this thing slides on there and it gets really stuck. There's a key in this middle groove down here, and that's what actually holds the steering wheel to be able to turn that steering shaft and the rotary system. It's not gonna hurt to hit this with some penetrating oil, some WD-40, whatever works for you, whatever you prefer, and let it sit maybe overnight or for a few hours. Doesn't always do the trick. Typically what's happening here is this thing's been tightened really tight, because obviously nobody wants the steering wheel to come off, and it's really wedged on that shaft. If somebody puts some grease, some white lithium, or even some WD-40 on there before they put the wheel on, it might help, but I won't lie, I don't always do that when I install a steering wheel, because it's not coming off for a long time. I don't really think about taking a wheel off until I'm doing it now. So a couple options here. Plastic or rubber mallet, if that's enough to get it by. Big thing, put that nut back on, especially if you're gonna be hitting it with something a little harder. And keep in mind, you can still damage the threads. The reason I put the nut on, so I'm not hitting the threads and then having to try to recut those, because I don't want to mess with that. So I put that on there, but if I hit this hard enough with something that's like a full-blown mallet, yeah, you can still damage the threads even with the nut on there. So what I'm gonna do, get some force pulling away from the console with the wheel, and then I'm just gonna tap, kind of rotate. And when that fails, I climb on that console, I wedge my legs against there. We got ourselves a stubborn one. I've heard people ask, why don't you use a flywheel puller? I've actually never owned one of those. I've also heard people say they couldn't get their flywheel puller to attach, or it just mangled the steering wheel when they tried to pull on it. So that's why I keep tapping on it. I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of PB Blast. I'm gonna let that sit for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna hammer on it some more. The nice thing on this wheel, there's a couple different openings for centering the steering wheel, so I can get it in there. It usually finds its way in anywhere. I'm gonna hit that key with it also. And sometimes I'll take a little punch and tap at the key, because that can get some corrosion and that can get really locked on there too. But we'll let this sit for a little bit now that it's got some of that PB Blast, penetrating oil. And the other thing you might be thinking is just use a pry bar. There's really nothing to pry against here. So I've been letting this sit. I'm gonna go back to battle with it. Literally one tap after letting that sit for 20 minutes. One tap with the old metal hammer. Done. Take that nut off, set that somewhere safe. That leaves us with that steering shaft, and it's tapered on the end here. That's where you can get in trouble. If you really hammer on this and you damage these first couple threads without that nut on there, you may never get that nut back on there. That other component that's on here, check this out, is this key. It's a Woodruff key, or as I call it, a half moon key. And this one actually has a lot more play in it than I would normally see. So a little half moon key, Woodruff key. Let's get that out of the way too. Now let's get into the good stuff. I'm gonna pull this rubber cover off just by working around it. So all that was a cover, but this is where it gets scary. Not really. So take a look. It looks like there's a lot going on here. And what this is essentially just a way of jointing this steering shaft to connect it in the middle here and create a pivot point for that to move. On the bottom side, you'll see little gear teeth. And when I push this button in on the bottom, that's what allows a detent to come out and grab at different points for that to tilt. Really simple in nature, but looks very complicated, especially if you're not used to tearing these things apart. This is all gonna stay intact pretty much, but we're gonna end up pulling things apart piece by piece. And yes, at the end, I'm gonna show you how to reinstall it, but if you get bored with me by that point, you can just follow these steps in reverse to put it back together. Sometimes that's months down the road. If you're at that point, you can just come back to this video and watch me put it back together. Our next move is getting this black plastic housing off and out of the way. To do that, there are 2 machine screws that go in, and they're actually threaded right into the housing that we're gonna get to eventually. Save these. I don't think you wanna lose these. I couldn't tell you what thread that is or what size without going to the hardware store and having them help me figure it out. So these will go somewhere safe. Right now, it's a good idea. Just grab a bin or a tote, something to throw stuff in. Voila. Take all those components, throw them into one spot. Got that second machine screw. Popping those screws out is gonna release this plastic. You may have to wiggle it a little bit. You do have to get your steering shaft straight out again, so you may have to adjust where it was at. That's gonna come off, and when I pull that off, it's gonna leave this little rubber booty. It's slid into here, into this little area. It's gonna leave that on the tilt button, pull that right off, and I like to leave it oriented just how it was, because you might forget which direction this goes. So it was here. I'm gonna take it off, slide it right back in how it was. Then you'll know how it goes when it's time to put it back together. So that exposes all of the metal components here. Kind of looks like it's something from the Terminator, I don't know. But a lot of metal, a lot of scary looking. Not so bad though. What I need to do is turn this mechanism. So on the top side, you're gonna see at this point, there's 2 nuts showing. One on each side of this piece of steel here. I need to turn that to expose those Allen heads. And when I do this, those are what are holding basically this top part of the steering mechanism to the bottom part of the guts of it. That's where our joint happens. So what I need to do is loosen that bottom one. In order to do so, I need to make sure that this mechanism here is out of the way, and I can get an Allen head in there. 5:30 seconds, Allen head. I'm gonna pull that out. The nut will stay in place. It's kind of in a little housing that's cut out for it on that back side. With that out, I can now loosen these giant Phillips head. I don't even know, it's like a Phillips number 20. But I'm gonna use a Phillips head number 3 and carefully remove each of these. There's a lock washer behind there holding that in place safely. So Phillips number 3, gently so I don't strip it. I'm gonna go ahead and back those out. They've never been stubborn on me before. So using that slightly undersized, this is probably a number 4. It's always worked for me. Just be gentle. Again, there's 1 on each side here. We're gonna undo both of them. I set these aside because I am gonna thread them back in there rather than throw them in my bin. Loosen that top Allen wrench just a little bit. That top Allen head, and it'll slide right off. It's just holding some extra tension down. This top one doesn't actually go through this hole in the steering shaft right here. doesn't go through there, but it does add tension when you clamp it down. It's just necessary, obviously, to hold this whole shebang together. I'm gonna tighten that back up just so it doesn't fall out. I might need to loosen that when I slide this back on though. This is well greased here. So we'll make sure we'll leave that grease. If you wipe it off, just re-grease it before we put things back together. So that great big scary thing, it's not so scary when it comes apart like this. We don't need to get into the guts. We don't need to take the springs off. Don't mess with any of that. All we needed to do was pull that one Allen head screw out, that machine screw, and I'm gonna put it back in here so I know right where it goes. Just gonna get it so it's snug. It is a nylock or nylon locking nut on the other side. Just loosely tighten that back in so that you don't lose it. That's gonna go through that hole in the steering shaft when this all comes back together. I can set this aside now, just as it is. And before I get any farther, I don't know why, I just always throw these back in here. But that way they're right there, intact, ready to go when it's time to put it back together. The next thing that's holding this together is essentially these 3 bolts here in the middle. That's holding the steering, the rotary part that I showed you a minute ago of how the cable comes out. That's the guts of how this whole push-pull cable system works. That's all held in by these 3 quarter 20 threaded bolts. So I'm gonna grab a 7/16 wrench, and those are gonna come right out of here. I'm gonna need a hand on the back side to keep that mechanism from falling. Luckily, this whole panel here, nothing's connected. I can just remove this right out, and I'll be able to get my hand behind so that doesn't fall on the concrete floor. Pull these right out. I've got 2 out. This last one, I need to get my hand back there because, see that disappear there? That's allowing me to pull this guy out. That's your rotary system. That's the gearbox inside of there that's turning, which pulls and pushes your steering cable, which turns your motor. Fun stuff. With these, I do like to put these back in. I lost my washer here, but I do like to put these back in just gently into these holes, the threaded holes here, so that they're where they need to be when the time comes to put things back together. So that's ready to set aside. I'm gonna put that in my bin as well. We've got this cast piece here left to take off, and all that is are 3 more quarter 20 bolts with a nylock nut and washer on the back side. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab an end wrench, and I'm gonna get that on the back side, zip these off with my impact, and then this whole thing is done. We're taking apart at that point. That's what you're working with on the front side, that bolt, and a big heavy washer and a nut on the back side. We're gonna pull all 3 of those out. You could label or take a picture of yours, but if you're following along the video, you won't need to. You can put a little T or an up arrow here to mark that this is the top hole. If you're referring back to this video, you're not gonna have a problem. And the way everything fits back together, it has to orient this way anyhow for that tilt button to be in the proper spot. So keep that in mind, no need to worry, but if you are worried, put a little T right here so that marks the top. That's where this hole is gonna be. Just like that, this is gonna come right out. So you'll see when we get to installing it, all we're gonna need to do is cut this hole back out. This will slide down in and everything will come back together from there. I'm gonna put those bolts back in here, set this aside. I'm not ready to reinstall this yet, but I will be soon. And I'm gonna show you exactly how I do that, coming right up. Before we get to reinstalling that tilt helm, let's take a second real quick to check out our pontoonstuff.com seating. This is flooring. This flooring has actually been on this boat for 3 or 4 years now. Still looks amazing. Luxury seating from pontoonstuff.com. The helm I'm going to be installing this tilt mechanism on for steering is from pontoonstuff.com. They've got switch panels, plug and play, electrical harnesses, everything you need for your boat. Let's get back into this project and putting it back together. First thing I need to do when I get on my new helm, this is that large helm from pontoonstuff.com. Whether you're putting it on this large helm or the standard helm, deluxe helm, it's all the same in terms of how this is going to reinstall. Maybe you're putting it on a totally different helm or a good used helm. Maybe you're installing this for the first time, you just need to know how. Either way, this is how it's going to go. The perfect size hole for this mechanism to drop back in is actually like 2 3/8 inch. So I don't have a hole saw for that. 2.5 inch is going to work perfectly fine. So let's go ahead. I've got my center hole here. We're going to run that to 2.5 inches. And I did prepare, this is just, it's like 1/4 inch thick plastic, the rotomolded plastic. A lot of times I will double this up on the back side. So I've got a little hole here that's lined up with the center hole that was in here. I cut the top just at a little angle, little curve. So I'm going to punch a 2.5 inch hole through this as well. We'll run our hardware and everything through both. And this just adds just a little reinforcement to thicken this up. This tilt mechanism is pretty heavy compared to a standard helm, so let's just reinforce it. I'm going to pull these longer bolts out of here. I just had them stowed in there so I wouldn't lose them. And the main reason you're probably doing this is because you're restoring your pontoon boat, or maybe that's why you're watching this anyway. But you've got a perfectly good steering system. Most of these things will last 20, 30 years or longer. This boat's only about 15 years old, and everything works perfectly fine in it. So that's probably where you're at. That's why you're redoing this. So when you're using it on a new console, that's why I like to keep everything together, packaged, so I remember where everything went, and that way I can't misplace it either. Because sometimes you might tear your boat down, take this apart. It might be months until you're watching the second part of this video to put it back together. Keep that stuff together, put it in a tote, put it in a bag, something to keep it separate from everything else so you don't lose it. So I've got this in place here. I know I need to drill 3 holes. They're going to be a 1/4 inch hole, one in each of these openings right here. And when I do that, I'm going to go ahead and just hold this second part that I drilled out right up to it, the back side. Watch your fingers. Don't want to put a hole in those. And we'll drill our holes, and then we can run that hardware and get this mounted in nice and tight. This is where you do want to remember that orientation, keeping this vertical so that way everything tilts straight up and down and not off to the side. This does need to be lined up as vertical as you can get it. To make my life easier, I'm going to just run this one in, put this on the back side, run it through, and put a nut on it. That'll make it a lot easier to drill my other 2 holes, especially getting them in accurately. It's going to help hold that plastic backer in there as well. Big washer and that nylock nut on the back side. And I would normally say put anti-seize on everything you're tightening, especially if you're using power tools. I've never seized up hardware on a steering system before when it's the factory hardware. I'm going to drill my other 2 holes. They give you these really long bolts just in case you're going through something like the old Helm that had pretty thick wood behind fiberglass. This is fairly thin. Again, that's why I backed it up with some extra plastic, just doubled the thickness there. And if you're using this Helm at home, yeah, you could put an aluminum backplate in there too. I think I've done that one time when we're doing hydraulic steering just to stiffen it up because that is so heavy as well. But for this is going to steer nice. It's going to be reinforced, no problem. We'll tighten those 2 down as well. This is locked in. My next step is going to be to run that steering shaft up through and get my rotary system in the back side there. Same thing here. I ran those bolts in so I didn't lose them. I'm going to back those out, and then we can slide this through. You can run this any direction you need to. If you needed to put space so that the helm was offset this way, you can. You could go this way depending where the hole is for your steering cable. The big thing is the cable can only go in that one side that has the 2 bolts. It can't go in this top side. So keep that in mind. In this case, my cable is going to come up the starboard side of the boat, right on top of the pontoon, and feed into this top spigot here. So I'm going to orient it this direction. Throw that rotary helm underneath, grab it. That's why I cut everything out before I get to this, so I can reach my arm right in through. Here's where the glove box is going to go. And I'm going to push this all the way up. It gets this stuck through. And then I know where my holes were because these are already marked with where the washers were. But again, there's multiple holes. You just need to get it to where all 3 can line up. And then we'll get these started by hand. And then I can tighten them. I like to tighten them with a wrench just to get them hand tight. This is not something you want to over tighten ever. I promise you that. And starting by hand is going to help you not cross thread them, because you're going into that casting of the mechanism itself, the rotary helm. You don't want to strip those or cross thread them. If your hands get real dirty like this, you're going to want to wash them before you get all touchy-feely on this rotomolded plastic. Otherwise, you're going to leave dirt and grease everywhere. It does clean up really well with dish soap and a rag, though. So supporting from behind, I'm just going to get these just snugged up. And then I will go by hand with my ratchet and just tighten them so they're snug. I'm not going to over tighten them. Don't go breaking these off. I got maybe like 1/8 to 1/4 more turn out of them. I like where that's at. This thing is ready to start putting our jointed part back together for the tilt. Our next piece to go on is that Terminator looking gadget that's actually going to tilt your wheel for you. Pretty important piece. I need to pull these guys out of here. These big Phillips head machine screws. And then I also, if you remember, I need to loosen these 2 Allen heads. This bottom one, so if this is the top out by the tapered shaft here, that's the top one. That one just needs to be loosened a little bit. The bottom one, or the closest to the end, that needs to be removed completely. Try to keep that nylock nut intact on the opposite side. It's gonna make your life a lot easier, because remember, that is going to slide over the steering shaft, and then that little machine screw with the Allen head is gonna go through that. We'll snug everything up, both of them. We'll be in a good spot. Well, 5/32 Allen wrench. Remember, this was greased, so if you just left the grease that was on there, cool. If not, re-grease it. But we're going to slide this over that shaft. It's going to just rest in place. It kind of catches. With that held in place, before I tighten those Allen heads, I'm going to go ahead and run these machine screws back in. And then I'll hand tighten with the number 3 Phillips or number 4. Just cinch those down so it crushes into that lock washer, and then you'll be all set. That's locked in. Now I need to reinsert that Allen head machine screw into that bottom hole, the one closest to the steering shaft. Get that tightened back up. With that one snug, I'll tighten the top one. I had just loosened that off just so I could get it to slide over top of the steering shaft. And that is rock solid back in place. Our next step is putting that grommet plastic cover piece back on. And remember, we slid our little thumb pusher tilt mechanism cover back in how it was. Again, once in a while, ask me how I know, that can get flipped upside down, and then you're trying to fit this back together and it'll never go. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to slide that thumb piece back onto the post on the bottom here, and then I can slide this cover right over top. You got to avoid those springs, and then that's going to sit nice and flush when you get it in there properly. And then we remember we've got those 2 little Phillips head machine screws that are going to thread into this cast, the base cast, and hold this cover in place. With that in place there, we're ready to put our rubber boot back on. And that's just a matter of wrestling a little bit with this plastic edge and getting that. There's a lip inside of here that's going to catch around that. Just manipulate that around, and that is in place. We've got our tilt working. All we need now is a steering wheel on here. I cleaned this up, cleaned up pretty nice. The vinyl's not in bad shape. It's actually the same steering wheel that we use. I think it's that Schmidt wheel that we use from pontoonstuff.com in a lot of cases, but it says StarCraft in here. I thought it's kind of cool. Let's keep this with the boat, and saves $100 or so. Perfectly usable, nothing wrong with it. Just a little sun faded, but again, we get that StarCraft insignia. I think that's pretty neat. So on some steering wheels, there's multiple teeth. Some go all the way around. And that's going to allow you to line up so that when the motor is steered straight, you can slide the steering wheel on and everything can line up. That might be with like a certain directional steering wheel. In this case, there's really no direction. It's a 3-spoke. And when I put that center cap in, That's not really directional either. So there's really no way to have this wheel lined up perfect. But again, if you are installing a steering wheel that needs to be lined up with certain spokes in a certain direction, or a label on it or something that needs to be oriented correctly, you can always loosely put this on and then take it off once the steering cable is installed, center it how you want it, then tighten everything down nice and snug. In this case, I'm just gonna slide it on, line up the center groove here with my key, and then I can orient this cap right in there. It's not gonna hurt anything. So I turn my steering shaft so that that keyhole is vertical, and I'm gonna slide my key in, and then I'm gonna line up that center slot on the steering wheel, make sure I catch the whole key when that goes on. Then we take our washer and that 3/4 inch nylock nut, and I'm gonna go grab my big wrench and get that snugged down. This part is in. We've got tilt. I can tilt it out of the way to get at my gauge panel when I install that or anything else. Really a nice system. Adds a lot of convenience when you're talking about getting in and out of your captain's chair and being able to tilt this up out of the way if you need a little extra space, and then quickly drop it down so it's more comfortable when you're driving. Let's look at the back side of this real quick, and let's talk about how the steering cable is going to go in. Since it'll be really hard for me to show you underneath when I'm installing this cable, I'm just going to show you now how I do this. So we're kind of flipped upside down right now, but my cable will be coming in from this side over here. I'm going to make a nice soft bend. Ideally, a 1 foot radius bend on anything with your steering cable is ideal. When you start to bend it tighter, it's going to wear out faster, or you might get extra friction. It's a big, heavy steel cable sliding through a sheathing. You got to make sure that you're not putting a lot of tension or kinks in that. When I go to slide my cable in, the end of it, the coiled end, is going to go in this spigot in the center. When it goes to grab, I'm going to turn my wheel to the left, and that's going to pull that cable in all the way. So I need to pull these bolts out so I can draw that cable all the way in. You could look with a flashlight just to make sure, but you'll see the barb of your cable slide all the way to where these are going to slide in, tighten up, and catch the barb of the cable to lock the sheathing in to allow it to work properly. If in doubt at all, just steer it all the way to the right. You could even pull on the cable a little bit. It should not go anywhere if it pops out. You probably just didn't put the cable all the way in to where your bolts here could catch on the barb. That's a wrap on this install of a tilt Helm rotary style. I do have a 2-part series of installing this whole Helm, not with the tilt system, but if you want to see how that's done, go to the channel. You could have gone to a marina and paid $150, $200 an hour to have this installed, but you got to do it at home, hopefully following these steps. Remember, this Helm, all of the seats on that boat that we're finishing up right now, those are all from pontoonstuff.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.